Built 6,000 years before Stonehenge, Gobekli-Tepe is the oldest temple in the world. Gobekli changes everything, and it's not an exaggeration. When Gobekli-Tepe was uncovered in 1994, it changed how we understand the rise of human civilizations. This is an area in southwestern Turkey. Ian Hodder, anthropologist at Stanford University, says Gobekli changes everything. It's not an exaggeration. When this was uncovered in 1994, it changed everything we thought we knew about human history. Gobekli-Tepe is a massive ancient temple found in Turkey, built out of pillars organized into great stone rings. The pillars are decorated with intricate sculptures of lions, scorpions, and vultures, twisting around their sides, but they're more than just beautiful works of art. They're the foundations to a structure holding upheaving blocks that some of which weigh more than 10 tons. The artwork and engineering is incredible. That anyone could have lifted up 10-ton stones and placed them atop a foundation strong enough to hold them in place is an incredible feat in any time. But what makes Gobekli Tepe so unbelievable is that it was built in 10,000 millennia BC. That's about 12,000 years ago. More than 11,500 years ago, and it's actually the oldest temple in the world. Now, just how long ago was 9,500 BC? Let's put that in perspective. Stonehenge was built about 3,000 BC, 5,000 years ago, and the oldest signs of human writing were created in Sumer in 3,300 BC. That means that Gobekli Tepe is not just older than written language. More time passed from the construction of Gobekli Tepe to the invention of the written word than from Sumer to today. Even agriculture did not exist yet, or at least certainly not in that area. There are admittedly some small signs of people growing crops before 9,500 BC, but it's doubtful that there were any full-fledged communities with farms. The people who built Gobekli Tepe were what we'd call cavemen. They were hunters and gatherers working with tools made of stone, and they managed to build something that should have been impossible. The archaeologists who found Gobekli Tepe in the late 1960s didn't think it was anything more than a medieval graveyard. They had found a hill with broken slabs of limestone, and they didn't bother looking further, sure there'd be nothing more than a few bones laid to rest a couple of centuries before. It wasn't until 1994 that the truth came out. Klaus Schmidt, a German archaeologist, visited the site and realized immediately that there was something massive hidden underneath that hill. He said, within a minute of first seeing it, I knew I had two choices: go away and tell nobody, or spend the rest of my life working there. This is what Schmidt said later. He decided to stay, and he's been working on the site ever since. It was worth it. Radiocarbon dating has confirmed that this temple really was built 11,500 years ago, making it easily one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in recent history. It's hard to say anything for sure about how a place as old as Gobekli Tepe was used. Schmidt is convinced, though, that it was built as a temple. There are no cooking hearths, houses, trash pits, or farms to suggest that anyone ever settled down and started a town around it. Instead, it seems that the people who used it were constantly on the move. They were nomadic hunters who couldn't stay in one place for long. Jens Nordhoff, archaeologist who worked on the site, says it's a landmark. Back then, people would have to meet regularly to keep the gene pool fresh and exchange information. It's no accident they gathered there. They would have massive feasts inside. That's something we know for sure because they left countless animal bones behind. The animals they ate, though, were all wild animals like gazelle, deer, birds, and aurochs. They were animals that were hunted and carried off to the site for a meeting that must have held a deep spiritual significance. There's a good chance they got drunk during these meetings as well. Massive stone jars were left behind at the temple site, big enough to hold more than 40 gallons of liquid. There's no way to know for sure, but the archaeologists suspect that liquid was an early type of a beer. People came from incredible distances to visit Gobekli-Tepe. According to Schmidt, people from Israel and even as far as modern Egypt would make the pilgrimage to Gobekli-Tepe, a trip that, if he's right, would have required them to travel up to 1,500 kilometers. For anyone to travel that far, it would have had to have been the mandate of the gods. It's part of the reason why the archaeological team is convinced that this was an ancient temple, and that the carvings on the pillars are a glimpse into an ancient Stone Age idea of gods. Schmidt says, I think here we are face to face with the earliest representations of gods. They have no eyes, no mouths, no faces, but they have arms and they have hands. They are makers. In my opinion, the people who carved them were asking themselves the biggest questions of all. What is the universe and why are we here? It's more than just an old temple. It's a discovery that forces us to seriously rethink some of the biggest ideas about how human civilization began. Before, it was always assumed that civilization began with agriculture. People settled into farming communities first, we believed, and then worked together to build the massive temples and buildings that would make up humanity's first cities. Gobekli-Tepe, though, was built 500 years before its people built their first farms. That might mean that our whole concept of how human civilization began needs to be rethought. Here, at least, people seem to have congregated and worked together to build a temple before even making their first farms. Perhaps culture came before agriculture. That's what some people think Gobekli-Tepe represents. The force that gave birth to civilization was not necessary or survival. It was something spiritual. And this article was first in All That Interesting, published here under Creative Commons on Collective Spark by Stephen McCambly. Please leave your comments. Thank you. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.